Do you remember back in 2017 when Mercedes-Benz India did a massive mic drop when they launched the V213 E-Class? That's right, the long wheelbase E-Class, especially for India, first market after China, and it was a runaway success. It was already Merck's bestseller, and despite being more expensive, it just took control of its entire segment. That's because in chauffeur-driven India, nothing matters more than the back seat. Now, its rivals scrambled to put together a response, but it wasn't good enough. The E-Class simply dominated. And it's now only 8 years later that it has a true tailor-made rival. Say hello to the G68 BMW 5 Series. Now, it's normally called the G60, but it too has been stretched for India to give it a better backseat experience. But wouldn't you know it, just in time, there's also a brand new E-Class. This is the V214, and though it looks quite similar to the car that went before it, it is improved in just about every way. Now, I know there are other rivals in this segment, notably the A6, the S90 and the Lexus ES. But when it comes to the battle of the boss back seats, it's really down to these two right here. So today, we're going to compare how they drive, how they are in the back seat, all their tech, all their luxury, their refinement and their comfort, and at the end we're going to pick a winner. So stick around and tell us which is your favorite. This is the head-to-head we've been looking forward to all year, and at least for us in the office, the debate starts with the way they look. Now, these are both made for India cars, so of course we have to take a moment to talk about what they look like on the outside. This being a brand new generation of the long wheelbase E-Class, of course it's bigger than its predecessor. But would you believe it? The 5 Series is bigger still. It's a full 83 mm longer overall and 11 mm longer in the wheelbase than this new E-Class. But I think with the way that they look, it couldn't be more different from one another. And to me, it really highlights the difference between design and styling. Now, what do I mean by that? I like the styling of the elements of the BMW 5 Series. I think individually on their own they work really well. I like the kidney grille. It is big, but I think it's well executed. I like the use of the color bronze. You can have brushed silver as well, but this is a bold and welcome choice. I like that this is the M Sport kit. It looks nice and aggressive, and I love these swept back headlamps that are a callback to the E65 series, you know, the first one that came to India. They've also got really nice detailing with little blue accents on the inside and these lovely projector beams. Round at the back, I really like the design of the tail lamps. Simple, elegant, and still very much a BMW signature. And even the wheels, if you look at them, they've got a nice sporty M style design, twin 5-spoke layout, and I think they look really great on their own. But, and this is a big one, the E-Class has exactly the same size wheels and tires. But the biggest complaint people have with the 5 Series is that its wheels and tires look small, and that is the difference. The E-Class, I think, is much better proportioned. As a result, overall, I think it looks better. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. Now, conversely, I'm not such a big fan of some of the details on the E-Class. In these lower 4-cylinder variants, you get reflectors rather than projectors for the LED headlamps, and I think that just looks a little bit basic in what is an 80 lakh rupee car. I do kind of like the grille, but this black surround, it just doesn't shout class like previous E-Classes have, and especially on a lighter colored car, doesn't look as classy in my opinion. But my least favorite part about the E-Class look is around the back with those tail lamps and the chintzy 3-pointed stars inside. It just looks a bit cartoonish, and again, not befitting the class that is associated with a Mercedes E-Class. But then I'm just nitpicking. On the whole, I think this is the better looking car thanks to its much better proportions and just the way it sits on the road. This thing looks a little bit confused. Very large and very imposing, yes, but not quite as elegant as the E-Class on the whole. Phew, that's probably going to upset a few people, but hey, that's just my opinion. Tell us in the comments what you think. While you do that, a quick word on the boots, and both cars are closely matched at 510 and 520 litres for the Merc and Beamer respectively, and both have space-saver spare tyres hidden under a special cradle under the false floor. Now, I know these cars are all about the back seats, and I'll get to that in a moment, but first I want to tell you a bit about their high-tech new cockpits, starting with the Mercedes. Lo and behold, much of the drama from the EQE and EQS has made its way to the E-Class in the form of this super screen dashboard. Now, it's not the hyper screen, it's not one continuous piece of glass, and yes, the driver display, the separate 12.3-inch unit. Yes, and also the central touchscreen is a bit smaller at 14.4 inches, but it's still a very, very good system, and I'll get back to its functionality in a little bit. What turning the entire dashboard into a piece of black glass has done, however, is attract loads of fingerprints and dust and reflections, which is very, very annoying while you're on the move. However, quality overall has taken a step up from the previous E-Class. I mean, there are still a few plasticky feeling bits of trim, but overall the material quality is better, the shut lines are tighter, and it all feels very, very rich. There's soft touch just about everywhere, nice cool metallic stuff over here, rich looking and feeling wood, and very, very soft leather on the steering wheel. It's also borrowed a lot from the S-Class, like this island for the memory controls, seat controls, and the door handles, and these floating metallic door grabs. It's all very rich feeling, but not all for the best, because it's also inherited a lot of that car's touch controls. Everything is touch controls. The seat controls, the steering control, the sunroof control, and of course these few shortcut buttons that you have down here. Now, as always, I will lament the fact that a lot of the controls have migrated into the touchscreen. I don't like that. I don't think it's very intuitive. But this time they made things a little bit worse, because the AC controls, though they are fixed to the home page, are a two-step process now. You tap it once and then you tap it again to set the temperature. They're just making it less intuitive to use while you're driving, and I don't like that. And as always, a passenger screen, it's a bit of a gimmick, but it's there if you want it. I'm sure you can switch it off if you don't. They've also, for some reason, equipped this car with digital AC vent control, and what that means is you go into the climate menu and choose from a bunch of different settings: head, upper body, uniform, or averted, and what it does is adjust the AC vents inside mechanically to point based on those settings. Again, a little bit gimmicky, and frankly, it's a good thing that you can override it and adjust them manually, because as luck would have it, in this particular car, the driver's side vents aren't working. Now, as for the seats, you had upholstery choices of cream like you see here, or brown or black. And the front seats are pretty snug. They have a wide array of adjustment, and they have these nice soft pillows to keep you a little comfier. They may not be heated or cooled or massaging, but they do have resonators in the back of them. Burmester 4D sound system, as Mercedes calls it, that thumps to the beat of the music. That's quite interesting and quite cool. And of course, the Burmester system itself sounds exquisite. Like that, there are a few more pieces of interesting tech that they've added to this new E-Class, like that camera over there. It not only lets you take photographs and selfies with you and your crew, but also lets you do video conferencing. But now both those features are restricted to the front seat and not at the back, which is quite interesting for a chauffeur-driven car. But all things considered, this is a far more luxurious experience than the previous E-Class, and it does feel like a step up in terms of premium quotient. So yes, a huge leap forward for your chauffeur in the E-Class, but how will he or she feel at the wheel of the 5 Series? Now yes, the interior of the 5 Series might not have the drama of the super screen in the Mercedes, but it's got a whole lot of appeal in its own right. It also may not have that driver focus of 5 Series of old, but there is a nod to it in the way this central panel is tilted ever so slightly towards the driver. What it's transformed into is a very high-tech and luxurious cabin inspired by the new 7 Series. It all starts with this interaction bar, which it borrows from the 7 Series. What it is basically a piece of crystalline trim behind which sits ambient lighting that's active and changes based on the drive mode or the situation, and it even has some controls embedded within it. It also hides the AC vents, which are nowhere to be seen because they're behind the bar, and you control them with these digital toggles over there. So not quite digital AC vents like you have in the Mercedes, but pretty cool. I just wish you could see what you were doing with these controls. Now yes, speaking of AC controls, I will once again lament the fact that they've moved up into the touchscreen, but at least it's a one-step process to change the temperature, unlike in the Mercedes. This BMW iDrive, it's very, very slick. It's a 14.9-inch screen over here and a 12.3-inch unit over there. and it is very crisp looking, very sharp and very responsive, but I really wish there weren't so many sub menus. You feel like you might take a whole month to really dig in and learn this entire system. Luckily, there are a few shortcuts. There's a widget bar over here for your most frequently used functions, and there is a host of controls, shortcut touch buttons for a lot of functions, the classic iDrive rotary controller that I absolutely love, a physical volume control, and of course your gear selector and engine stop start button. Overall quality is actually really good, on par with the Merc and better I think in certain places. The design is quite a mixed bag. I do like this choice of brown and grey upholstery. You can also have blue and black, which is quite interesting. I also like the open pore wood, but this sort of lightning insert kind of confuses me. Overall though, it's a great place to be, and I particularly like these seats. They're nice and soft and suitable to much larger frames than the ones in the Merc, I think, and you can really sink into them. Plus, they are ventilated, which the Merc seats are not. Now, in the interest of fairness, I should point out that the BMW's gizmos are also focused on the front seat rather than the back. It too has a selfie camera, but it's more for the security system than for Zoom meetings. In fact, here's a side-by-side comparison of how these cars stack up on features, so pause if you want to check it out. And if you want to know more about these cars' high-tech infotainment and their hi-fi audio systems, stay tuned because we're doing a detailed comparison of the two with Nishant Padiyar, editor of What Hi-Fi India magazine. You don't want to miss it. And with that done, let's hit the road, and of course I have to start in the back seat. Over to the E-Class. The E-Class features what Mercedes likes to call its Maybach doors. Now, of course, that's named after the Maybach S-Class where they first featured, and what it is in essence is a shorter door that makes opening and closing quite easy, that let you step around it and sit down into this seat. It also adds a little bit of privacy with this C-pillar that you can tuck your head behind. It's an interesting touch and does add to the luxury quotient. But you also have to note that you sit quite low in this car, so you have to step back and down into the seat when you get in. But once you're here, what a wonderful experience it is. And a lot of that is centered around this entire console here. It starts with a set of 4 switches on either door, each of which lets you control the rear windows, rear sun blinds, rear windscreen blind, and rear sunroof blind. But really, the E-Class's party trick has always been its reclining rear seat. Look at that. It goes all the way to 36 degrees of recline, and you really feel like you're just about to have a nap, sat back in business class and ready to take off. But this new V214 adds another feature, which is extendable thigh support. Yeah, so it's not quite the Ottoman that you get in the S-Class, but what a difference it makes. It comes out quite a bit down here and just adds a little extra layer of comfort to the backseat experience of the E-Class. Plus, if you want to free up some more leg room, you can just press this button here and you can control the front passenger seat as you wish. Of course, the E-Class gets these soft cushions, it gets them in the front as well, though that's something the 5 Series also enjoys. Though in our test car, the front ones are missing for some reason. You get a twin pane panoramic sunroof, the one in the front opens, but your own private glass roof at the back is not a bad thing at all, is it? What they've really added and doubled down on for this new E-Class is the ambient lighting, which now wraps around the back and is also animated and color changing. Personally, I find it a bit much, and you can turn it off if you don't like it, but especially at night, it has an incredible effect of lighting up the entire cabin and bathing it in a colored glow. Legroom, as you can see, is more than sufficient, and especially when it's in this reclined position, headroom is also really good in this car. Now, both these cars technically have bench rear seats and can seat a 5th passenger, and neither of them is very good for that 5th passenger. When you flip up the armrest in both cars, you'll find a tiny little middle seat, but you'll also find a huge center console and a high central tunnel, which makes it not ideal. But I will say that the 5 Series does fare slightly better than the E-Class in that regard, And that's a counterpoint of the E-Class's powered seats. Because they have to move around, the seats are heavily contoured for two, whereas in the 5 Series is a flatter bench and you can sit a little bit more comfortably in the center. But let's be honest, the back seat is for the Saib, and here it's also about being blocked off from the world outside. Now, over a bad patch of road, the E-Class definitely has a bit of a firm edge to it. You get moved around a whole lot more than you do in the 5 Series. I'm not sure if you can tell right now, but it just feels more stiffly sprung, and as a result, undulations just move you around in the cabin and move the whole body of the car a whole lot more. What's also a bit annoying is that you can hear quite a bit of road grumble in the cabin as you go over a rough surface, like we are right now. Admittedly, that was a particularly rough patch of road, and all things considered, the E-Class does ride well overall. But then we got into the 5 and something unexpected happened. An area where the 5 Series surprisingly edges ahead of the E-Class is in ride quality. BMW was determined to really get that spot on for this limousine version of the 5, and they have done it. It's got a lovely soft edge, and you really know why they fitted those 18-inch alloys and don't encourage you to take the 19-inch alloy option. It feels truly plush and soft edge and soaks up even a really bad road very, very well. And that's not all. Refinement on the whole is better than the E-Class, whether that be from the suspension or the engine. You just feel better isolated in the 5 Series. So yeah, the big surprise is that while the E-Class rides well, the 5 Series is just a little bit better. You must remember that neither car has air suspension, and that actually brings me to another point. What's often a concern with big long wheelbase cars like this, especially one with over 3000 millimeters, is crossing speed breakers. But as you can see, it does it quite comfortably. We crossed some really heinous ones on our way here today and it didn't scrape. In fact, neither did the E-Class. Both of them have enough ground clearance to get over most speed breakers. Of course, be a little bit careful without scraping. And speaking of being careful, this car comes with an unusual problem because its rear doors are so huge, you have to be careful not to hit cars parked next to you when you're getting out. The upside of that is that ingress and egress is a whole lot easier because the door aperture is just so much bigger. What also helps is that this seat is placed higher than the one in the Merc, so it's quite easy to get into. Even for elderly passengers, that might be a bit of a benefit. Now, there's two differences in this BMW backseat since the last time I was here. One, this car has an accessory plugged into it that is an iPad holder you can buy from the dealer, and it's meant to replicate a rear entertainment system and put your own iPad there. There's even a USB Type-C port to charge it with. And the other is that there are now sunshades on the windows. Now, this is a bit of a makeshift operation. These aftermarket accessories that they fit in, it does get the job of keeping the sun out done, but it's not an ideal situation, is it? They don't fit perfectly. They're kind of loose, and I suppose they would vibrate once you go a little bit faster. But most of all, if you want to put the window down, you have to take them out first, which is a bit of an inconvenience. But kudos to BMW for at least trying. The main difference, of course, between this car's back seat and the E-Class is that this seat doesn't recline. In fact, it's not powered at all. The E-Class also gets moving under thigh support, which this does not get. But BMW has chosen a recline angle of 31 degrees, which is not as much as the maximum recline of the E-Class, but it's pretty good. It's a relaxed position, and of course with these neck cushions, you can get pretty comfy back here. Now, BMW said the reason they did this was that they could fit thicker cushioning in the back seat itself, and I gotta say, that bit has worked. This back seat, at least from a cushioning standpoint, feels noticeably plusher than the one in the E-Class. You can really sink your spine into it and get really comfy. Frankly though, the E-Class's reclining function and power adjustment trumps this on the feel-good factor. And remember, it's also very comfy. It's a similar story with the legroom. Compared side to side, you can see that this one does have a few millimeters more than the E-Class, but really it's like pouring a glass of water into a swimming pool. Both of them are really, really spacious, and in isolation, you're not going to notice the difference. More so, in the E-Class, you can control the front passenger seat and free up more space if you really wanted to. So that is just a boon in itself. You can't control that from back here, but you can ask your chauffeur to move it from the touchscreen if you really wanted to. The 5 also gets a panoramic sunroof, but in this case it's a big single piece glass that doesn't open but lets in a bit more light. And finally, we have to see what these two are like from the driver's seat, just in case you give your chauffeur the weekend off, starting with the Mercedes. The driving environment of the new E-Class is a whole lot friendlier than the old E-Class, and that's largely to do with the new lower dashboard. This is especially true if you're a shorter driver like myself, because without that big hooded binnacle you get a much clearer and easier view out the front. This free-standing instrument cluster without a hood is still very easy to read in bright sunlight. That's just how good the quality and the brightness of the screen are. Now, under the hood is the familiar E200 powertrain. It's a 2-liter petrol making just over 200 horsepower and 320 newton meters of torque. It's allied to Merc's 9-speed 9G Tronic automatic gearbox. And as we've seen in the past, it's generally very smooth as long as you're not being hurried. But at really low crawling speeds or in really high performance situations, the 9-speed auto can get caught out and fumble through its gears. It's not a particularly sporty powertrain. In fact, it's pretty laid back, and unlike the one in the BMW, it prefers to be driven at 8/10ths. There is a sport mode though, and frankly, while it does make things a little bit quicker, it only serves to highlight this powertrain's weaknesses, which are an at times clunky gearbox and relaxed responses. This engine also starts making a noise a lot sooner than the one in the BMW. Even at low revs, you'll hear a bit of grumble from this petrol engine, which is not in keeping with the otherwise great refinement of the rest of the car. Still, you can't deny that it is quite a strong powertrain, and step on it and it will get a move on. Overtaking on the highway should be no problem at all for this car. I'm also happy to report that this car is equipped with auto emergency braking, and once you turn it off, it stays off. Yes, this might sound like I'm nitpicking, but if anybody's owned a modern Merc, including the last E-Class, you'll know that that is the one screen that you will go to again and again every time you start the car in the menu. On the handling front, it is pretty impressive. I would say it might even feel a little more tied down than the BMW. So it feels more controlled, but it's nowhere near as exciting. It doesn't encourage you to drive fast. And that's because the steering, while it's light and accurate and direct and great for navigating through traffic and on the highway, it's not particularly exciting. It's not got that last degree of feedback, and the whole car just doesn't feel as agile as the BMW. So ultimately, this is not the performance car in this test, but the good news is that Mercedes has you covered if you want that. For a considerable amount more, you can have the E450, which is powered by a straight 6 petrol engine, and it also gets all-wheel drive. So while this E200 might not be the self-driving owner's choice, Mercedes has better versions on offer. But the BMW offers just one engine at the moment, the 530 Li. So is it the ultimate driving limousine? Now, even though this is a limousine, it's still a BMW, and even though it has a very high dashboard and a very high bonnet line as well, the moment you sit in, the first thing you want to do is lower the seat down for the sportiest possible position. In front of you is a meaty steering wheel, perhaps a little too chunky for my liking, but there's no doubt that the intent is to make you drive faster. But let's get right down to what's under the hood. It's a 530 Li, which means a 2-liter turbocharged petrol engine with a mild hybrid system. It puts out 258 horsepower and 400 newton meters of torque, which is considerably more than what you get in the Mercedes-Benz. Now, I know the Merc has a stronger hybrid assist in terms of electric power boost. This one only has about 11 horsepower and 25 newton meters of electric boost, but overall this powertrain feels far stronger than the one in the Merc. Even in one of the many comfort modes that this car has, it's all very confusing. It feels far more eager off the line. But when you put it into sport mode, which in this car is a bit of a longer process, my modes, sport, yes, and also tap the gear lever down into sport to activate the gearbox. It is proper quick. I should point out that it's not just BMW's EVs that have the enhanced sound. This one does too. And it's really doing its job, piping in a nice engine note into the cabin. Typical of the ZF 8-speed auto that BMW uses in all its rear-wheel drive cars, it can be sometimes lazy to roll in the power, but once you get it on the boil, or if you have it in manual mode, it feels nice and progressive and continuous in its power delivery. Now, of course, this car has paddle shifters, but it also has an extra feature where if you hold down the left paddle, you get 10 seconds of boost. And then this thing really flies. Whoa! Not bad for a limousine, huh? It's hardly a surprise then that the BMW accelerates quicker than the Merc in our performance tests, but actually they're neck and neck from 0 till about 40 kph. Then the 5 roars ahead and gets to 100 kph almost 2 seconds quicker in just 6.45 seconds. One thing's for sure, at least on the powertrain front, they haven't forgotten what it's like to be a BMW. This might just be the 4-cylinder version, but it is an absolute rocket ship. Of the two, it's also the BMW that handles just that little bit better. Now yeah, you're never going to forget the fact that you've got a whole lot of car hanging out the back. But the steering and the suspension package is so good that it goads you on to drive faster and harder around corners. This is a limo that you could enjoy from behind the wheel. The steering is nice and progressive. It's got a decent amount of weight to it once you put it in sport mode, and the nose tucks in really sharply. Now this car doesn't have adaptive suspension. In fact, neither of them do. They both run on steel springs. And though it's got a very comfy ride, it's got surprisingly good body control as well, and an incredible amount of agility for something so big. Just the way it responds to your steering inputs reminds you that BMW remembers who it is first and foremost. Even the brakes, they've got a lot more feel and a lot more bite and a lot more progression to them. They are a joy to use whether you're driving slowly or in a high performance situation. But I know what you're thinking. This is a limousine. Hold your horses, dial it back, calm it down. So I'm going to do just that. And guess what? It's brilliant here too. It may be more powerful and more responsive than the Mercedes, but it's still very smooth off the line. That means your chauffeur will have no problem getting you away from some traffic lights without jolting you in the back seat. In comfort mode, the steering is also incredibly light, which makes maneuvering this big vehicle quite easy in city traffic. In fact, it is lighter than the Mercedes, so the larger dimensions of this car really can't be felt. So finally, though they expended a lot of cost and effort into making this a limousine, if you are the type that drives yourself occasionally, this remains the one to pick. What we have then is a bit of a conundrum. Both cars are incredibly impressive, both from the back seat and the front. Let's park up and see if we can sort this out, shall we? Now this ended up being a whole lot closer than we first anticipated, because when we looked at these two cars in isolation, it seemed like the Mercedes would absolutely trounce the BMW. But now that we've driven them back to back, the BMW put up a pretty strong fight, and that's because of its stronger mechanical makeup. Now if you enjoy driving, this is by far the better car to drive. It's got a stronger engine, it's got better handling, and it's just much more engaging from behind the wheel. But if, as intended, you are a chauffeur-driven owner and you're sat in the back, it has some strengths too. It's got a little bit more space. It's got the better ride quality and it's a little bit more refined too. And all those qualities are before you factor in that it costs almost 6 lakh rupees less than the Mercedes E-Class. But then the Mercedes has always been sold at a premium, and that's never stopped people from flocking to it. And that's because Mercedes knows what to do with a long wheelbase car like this. BMW had the perfect opportunity to really disrupt the E-Class's dominance, but Merc came out on top because of small little things: feel good factor, soft closed doors, the Maybach door that lets you hide behind the C-pillar and get a bit more privacy, the powered rear seats, the fact that you have powered sun blinds at the side, at the back, and even for the sunroof, all controlled from the back seat, and you have a boss mode to move the front passenger seat for you. It's those little things that make it a business class experience back there, and that's what seals the deal for the E-Class and makes it the winner of our test.